What's up, guys? NFL Week 14 is upon us, and it's early in the week, so it's time to plant some flags for guys that seem like they're going to rise up the ranks over the course of the next few days across the fantasy football industry, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it live for everybody else out there, so let's get right into it. Pulling up DraftKings on the screen, I'm going to point out, you can see the beating I have taken over the last few weeks, hemorrhaging about $500 a slate with the aggressive style of play that I do, but I'm just going to point that out up top because as we talk about a lot here on Splash Play, this show is all about accountability. This show is all about keeping it real. And for me, I'm going to win all my DraftKings money back come the end of best ball season, so I'm not that worried about it. Nice 20% advance rate going over there. But let's look at the QBs. Let's look at the slate overall, and let's get into it. So we got Josh Allen up top this week for the main slate going against the Jets. Tough matchup on paper, one that Josh Allen certainly can beat, but overall does seem like it could be a spot that's going to be a little bit undervalued relative to the marketplace. Everybody out there knows that the Jets are a good defense, and Josh Allen, everybody also might not know that he can beat any team. So interesting play, but probably too high of a price tag up top. Shout out Lunchable Connoisseur. Shout out to everybody who joins here. So you can hear I'm also sick as balls right now, so I'm doing the best I can to push through the last stages of various viruses being given to me by our adorable little boy Luca going to daycare every day. So deal with it, I guess, as best you can. And don't be afraid. The announcer voice will be back tomorrow, I'm sure, for a short form video on the channel. Jalen Hurts against the Giants, a play that I think is not going to look that good. And actually, you know what? It's worth pointing out the team totals up top as well. There's not as many games with high totals as there were last week. We certainly saw a lot of players going towards these games that, you know, the Bengals game of the world, or the Chiefs Bengals rather. Some of the other ones as well, they're on that afternoon slate looking pretty good. It's definitely one of those things that this week is not going to look nearly as good. And let me show you guys that actually as we go here. Hold up. Everything works slower when you're sick, and my brain works slower. My fingers work slower. I'm crushing it right now. Feel better, Spags. I'm in week 2 of what I think was RSV. Yeah, Luca had RSV too as well. I don't know that that's what I have, but you know, we pushed through. Luca spent 7 hours in a waiting room, in an ER waiting room with my wife Alex, and got nothing for it, got nothing going. So shout out to everybody who's got to deal with the little ones. Shout out to everyone who's got to deal with the cold on the East Coast. Not a lot of fun. But let's go through these scores here, these over-unders, of course, which are the most important thing you can look at for DFS to get a read on not just how these games are going to go, but also how the field's going to attack things. You're going to see right here, this is the only game with over 50-point over-under this week. The rest of them going to be in that mid-40s range. So Minnesota, Detroit going to be highly targeted. We all know Detroit's defense is bad. That's why Justin Jefferson's on the thumbnail behind me. He's a guy that right now doesn't project too well. Also the highest priced guy on the DraftKings slate. We'll talk more about that, but I think he is a player that you're going to hear a lot about across the industry as we go. Yeah, week 14 already. This is the time, guys. This is what we've been preparing all year for. If you've been playing best ball, week 14, this is when your teams actually qualify for playoffs, and then we can see what they do in week 17. So everybody who's posted their advance rates, all that for best ball, everybody who hasn't won money to this point as well, this is really the prime time. This is when you're in the bright lights. So now is when it matters the most. Obviously, redraft leagues as well, championship season, it all matters more now than ever, so make it count. Houston and Dallas, 44.5 point over under. Look at this spread for Dallas, -17. Got to think that one gets bid down a little bit over the course of the week, but it is Houston. We just saw Dallas smoke another team who's better than Houston on national TV. So that's a spot that I think maybe it doesn't go down at all here. But this to me feels like it should be more of a -15, -14. So I wouldn't mind taking that bet right now. If you are a value hound out there who wants to get bets before the market wisens up, that's one that certainly can change over the course of the week. Eagles a 7-point favorite on the road, 45.5 total for them and the Giants. Again, that's a higher total than you would think, but I think that's mostly going to be coming from the Philadelphia side. The Giants, as I've talked about time and time again, worst team in the NFC East. They showed it again this week, even though it was a tie with Washington. They're just a team that I don't think has anything going for them, and besides great coaching, and that's something that certainly can carry you far. But if you don't have the weapons, if Saquon's overrated, if they pay Saquon, I think they're making a gigantic mistake, as I've talked about a few times. But overall, it feels like the Giants to me go in the wrong direction. Philadelphia, we all know, looking prime for the season to get going. Tyler saying, can't wait for Houston to lose by 25. Injected into my veins along with Pollard to Mars. Look, I think that's a reasonable take to have. Pollard's certainly the more explosive play. Would it also shock you, though, if we get a Zeke, Jamal Williams kind of game where he punches into the end zone a few times and ruins a chalk Tony Pollard? We'll find out. But honestly, Pollard going against the Colts, like that was a tough matchup on paper. And he looked as good as he's looked in any other game so far this year. Houston, not that tough of a matchup. So certainly one where Pollard could have a ceiling game. We'll look at his price tag and we'll dig into that as well a little bit on DraftKings. Baltimore, Pittsburgh. It was announced a couple hours ago that Lamar Jackson's got a strained PCL, so it is going to be Tyler Huntley going. Not a big showing of faith here by the markets with a 37-point over-under in this one, -2.5 for Pittsburgh at home as well. So Baltimore, it feels like maybe they would have, they almost definitely would have been a favorite on the road if Lamar were playing, despite Lamar being kind of shitty this year. I think playing more for that contract, protecting himself, playing to keep himself safe for when he has the extension coming this offseason, or I guess moves to another team. But this situation for me, Baltimore, not a lot of faith for Tyler Huntley, even though I do think Huntley's at a good spot. And Huntley, we saw last year, really feed Mark Andrews. So if you are relying on Mark Andrews in best ball or your redraft leagues, I do feel like week 14 could be a week that we see Mark Andrews start to have some actual results when he has, quite frankly, not gotten them in about a month now, maybe a month and a half. Jets at Buffalo. Buffalo, a 9-point favorite here, 43.5 total in this one. Mike White, it seems like the expectation is he gets gobbled up. Can Garrett Wilson get there again? I think he's a play that will not be popping up quite as much in an optimizer this week as he has the last 2 weeks. I made the mistake of fading Garrett Wilson last week because I got paid the week before a little bit from having him in a lot of lineups in week 12. Week 13, though, he's chalk everywhere, ends up going off once again. So can he go off against Buffalo, a team that has not defended wide receiver ones well all season long? Maybe, but I do think Tre'Davious White coming back in there, having some more snaps, that snap count for him keeps rising. Could be one way that they do actually shut down Garrett Wilson after he went off again this week at Minnesota. I just want best ball playoffs to start so I get my min cashes paid out and have a bigger bankroll again. Yeah, I think I've been really encouraged seeing my stuff move around on DraftKings and Underdog as well. And of course, you can play on Underdog if you want to get some playoff best ball going. Use the promo code SPLASH at Underdog to double your deposit up to $100. It's free money. You can just roll it up towards that tournament, play playoff best ball, have a good time with it. But I do think I'm very excited to see how best ball does because it's been really tough to not talk about it endlessly, knowing that what you're seeing week to week is not going to be the final outcome. And that's why the people we've talked about, who I won't bash today, because I only have so much throat bandwidth to go around, said me and also Sasha Grey, I guess. That was a dated porn star reference, and I apologize to Sasha Grey and her family for that one. Either way, though, my throat bandwidth is not the best to be mean to people this week. That said, if you were touting best ball advance rates in week 8, you are showing you're an idiot. That's basically what it is. We know who I'm talking about. But if you're talking about it now, certainly get excited. I don't even care about my advance rates. I think on Underdog, I have one team that's really good. And it would shock me if I had less than the lower expected advance rate. The expected 16% you would have on there wouldn't shock me one bit. You just need one bullet to get there. So at the end of the day, that's what matters. So even if you did poorly this best ball season, even if you're not crushing on one of the sites, just takes one to get through, guys. That's all I would say is it takes one to get through, and that doesn't matter. There we go. Getting bonked early for throat bandwidth. Look, we don't have a bonk gif here. I'm too sick to bonk. Can't bonk me right now. I'm in a protected class of bonking. Jacksonville, Tennessee, 41.5-point over-under. Some interesting clips going around on Twitter today of Jacksonville's run defense against Detroit this past week. Really not good at all. And that's something that could really come home to roost against Tennessee with Derrick Henry. Again, another guy who I feel like has been down the last few weeks, or at least, if his ups haven't been as high as last year, it's not that much of a shocker. But the downs have been there as well, including in that game against Philly, where they really bottled him up. Jordan Davis being back in mattered, but more so the game script. Philadelphia putting up crazy amounts of offensive production is what spooked Derrick Henry last week. This week, though, if you need him going against Jacksonville, what I saw with some of those clips out there, I feel like it's a really nice spot for Derrick Henry to attack. The scheme for Jacksonville looks really bad. In Tennessee, we know the way that they win, the way that they overcome what they do in terms of a lack of talent. They fired their GM, and people were shocked by that one. This team is good. It's not good because of the talent they have. It's good because of the scheme. But Derrick Henry, we know can have those outlier days going against Jacksonville. This really feels like a Derrick Henry spot despite the low total, and certainly being a favorite. Never going to be something that hurts Derrick Henry that much. Cleveland and Cincinnati, one of the higher totals of the week, 47.5. I think this is a nice spot to go to Joe Burrow this week. Certainly disappointed that first game against Cleveland, but maybe that's something that's stuck in people's memory. Maybe they don't go to him enough, but I think Joe Burrow could put up a lot of points against a Cleveland team who really shouldn't have much motivation. They're not playing for anything right now. I don't think they have a realistic shot to make the playoffs. Cincinnati, though, we know what they're playing for. Coming off of a big game last week, they certainly are hitting their stride when you want it to be hit. And I think this is a spot for them where a Cincinnati stack would look pretty good theoretically. Kansas City at Denver. Boy, this one is going to be an ugly one in week 17 as well, but also 9-point favorite for Kansas City. I think this game should portend to be ugly, should be one that doesn't look that great. Denver, I think kind of fought back a little more than you would think in week 13. In week 14, though, I feel like just what are they doing out there? Why have Russ out there? You invested so much money in him, and the season doesn't matter. You're not winning anything. You're not going to go anywhere. So at this point, I do think, I said last week, I thought they're going to call off the dogs. Clearly, the defense kept trying as hard as they could, but I don't expect Denver to produce a lot, and Kansas City, we know, can produce in any adverse situation. Tampa Bay at San Francisco, 37-point over-under. This one's really ugly. And honestly, if you watched Monday Night Football yesterday, I'm sure you saw it firsthand. But seeing Tom Brady go into that spot yesterday and just be completely incompetent, just be completely inept, the coaching by Todd Bowles certainly doing no favors, the play calling by Byron Leftwich also doing no favors. But Brady looked good at the end of the game because they were actually able to throw it. Against San Francisco, though, he's going to get a lot of pressure up the middle. He's going to get a lot of pressure down the sides. He's going to be really having a tough time, especially if they are missing a couple offensive linemen like they were yesterday. It's a spot for Tom Brady that comes with a lot of risk and maybe some positive juju for him going back to the Bay Area, a place that he loves so much. A lot of rumors have been tying him there in the last few years. But going against San Francisco, even with Brock Purdy, that is a really big indoctrination, I feel like, of what Tom Brady's done this year. That the Niners being a 3.5-point favorite with a Mr. Irrelevant at QB, a guy who was the last pick in the NFL draft. I just think this could be a spot that Tampa Bay really gets destroyed and still doesn't score enough points on the San Francisco side to really matter. Carolina against Seattle, 43.5-point over-under. So this will be the last one of the main slate. And you can see Sunday Night Football looks pretty good with Miami and the Chargers. So maybe if you find this main slate too ugly, just play the showdown slate on Sunday night and have a good time with players that actually are pretty fun. Carolina and Seattle, 43.5-point over-under. This is a spot where we're going to see one player come up quite a bit on Fantasy Cruncher when I run the optimizer. That shocked me, who looks like currently the value play of the week. We'll see if those numbers come down through the course of the week, and I think they will. But one of the Panthers projects really well, and it's not DJ Moore, which shocks me. If anything, though, the one guy I would trust in this game would be DJ Moore, who was fed pretty handily by Sam Darnold that last game. The only guy really who got fed a meaningful amount of targets for Sam Darnold in his last start. So going against Seattle defense, we know is not that good. I think DJ Moore could actually be an interesting tournament play if he doesn't get steamed up too much this year. Brady to the Niners this offseason, that certainly seems like a possibility. I mean, there's now rumors tying him to New England, which I think is kind of interesting, but definitely a guy that it does feel like Tampa Bay, it's just not worked out for him. And honestly, the weird thing to me, if you watch that game, and again, like I'm not a put your hand in the dirt, watch every game and then pick up analysis from that. Like you should use the data. You should use just the core player projections. You should layer on a little bit of the Football Outsiders stuff, the DVOA that I talk about, of course, the footballoutsiders.com/subscribe, the PFF numbers, Sports Info Solutions, anything out there that's credible advanced analytics that teams actually go to. Use that stuff for a layer of coloring and don't watch games and go like, oh, this is what I saw. That said, there were plays where he didn't even look Mike Evans' way. Like one of the deep throws he threw to Julio Jones. Mike Evans was completely open on the other side, and he just didn't even look that way. And I feel like there are some trust issues with Evans and Brady. They have had some misconnections on the year. It's looked pretty bad. And I was shocked to see them not use Mike Evans in that game because when they did when it mattered, and he looked fantastic. I don't think it's a good spot for the Bucs overall and just what they're doing. And I think there's some real disharmony there with that team where Brady looks for Godwin every time. He looks for the running backs, does not look for his stud receiver downfield, who's actually been the guy that's created a lot of value for this team. And that's a bad thing going against the Niners, who actually struggle immensely against the deep ball. Spags started talking about throat damage that my wife burned cookies in the house, smoking me out. Coincidence. Hopefully she's got some throat bandwidth to go around to make up for that, Tyler. That's all I would hope. Foreman projecting well, we'll find out a little bit, but I think he has an okay projection, but I don't think he popped up in an optimizer, but we'll see in a little bit. So let's keep going through the QBs here now that we've established the over-unders and all of that. So again, Minnesota going to look pretty good here. Kirk Cousins, of course, you're going to see pulled up on the screen. I should shrink this one a little bit, I guess. There we go. There's his game log. We know what Kirk Cousins is. We know what he's not. He's not a guy who's going to necessarily have a huge fantasy point upside necessarily, but there's going to be a lot of Vikings coming up in optimizers, a lot of Vikings that project well this week. Justin Jefferson, very high priced. He's the one you want the most, but Adam Thielen and TJ Hawkinson, I will spoil it right now, coming up quite a bit as well. And it's because Detroit's not bad offensively, but also not good defensively, which is quite the combination to have when you are a team that needs to get fantasy production going. So Kirk Cousins, to me, right away, 6,100. There's a ceiling to that price tag. I think he's a guy that jumps out as being an interesting tournament play paired with Jefferson or paired with other stacks you want from the Vikings. Deshaun Watson going into Cincinnati, he is not going to be able to get away with this performance next week going against the Bengals. He was really bad against Houston. Again, another game that people were talking about heading into the league. People like Deshaun in the preseason. He looked rusty. He hasn't played football in 2 years. You expect him to dust off all of that rust or break off all that rust, whatever you do to rust, to remove all of that rust within 1 week. I don't think so. The Bengals defense is actually pretty good, but he's going to have to throw here. He just can't get away with a 54.5% completion rate, which I'm sure was not much better based on the accuracy ratings either. I'll find out tomorrow when I do the data show on this channel. But it's a spot for Deshaun Watson where you know he's going to have to throw. So if you want to buy in, you can, but I like some of these guys who are a little bit cheaper more than him. Geno against Carolina. Maybe if you expect DJ Moore to have the production, then you could see Geno pass a little bit more. But it feels like a game for Carolina where another team that really shouldn't have any motivation, they cut Baker Mayfield. They're going to run out Sam Darnold, it looks like, the rest of the year with PJ Walker as his backup. But defensively, they keep trying. Offensively, they keep trying. So potential for a shootout or a shootout-ish game relative to the price tags that can get you there fantasy-wise. But I've not been a regular Geno player. He's only really comes up for me when he's chalk, and I don't want to play him myself. But still a guy that I think is going to be live in some tournaments this week. Cousins, we talked about. Trevor Lawrence going against Tennessee, really good deep ball matchup, which we finally saw Philadelphia take advantage of last week. They've been the worst team against the deep ball, passive 20-plus yards all year long in terms of EPA, in terms of all the numbers that you would look at for that. So Trevor Lawrence can get this ball downfield, can have some upside, but is he a guy you really trust? Is he a guy you like that much? I don't think so. So he's probably not a guy I would want to get too crazily unless we're getting the receivers with him. Jared Goff, again, I think looks kind of live against Minnesota. One thing I want to point out too, and I think this is an important part of the process to not forget, don't forget these DVP numbers on DraftKings, because I have started to observe this a little more closely week to week, because I think there is a large portion of the field that is playing players based off of this opposing pass rank or opposing team rank going against these guys. And DVP is not a stat you want to look at. Like, it's not one that matters for what you're doing out there as a sharp player who's watching streams like this one, watching the ETRs and the stochastics of the world. You are not someone that wants to worry about DVP for your plays, but you do want to be aware of when these DVP plays also align with things that you're seeing in terms of like the DVOA numbers, in terms of the offensive totals, the implied totals, all that stuff. Like, if you're playing plays that people are just going to land on because they see this green mark here for Kirk Cousins, you are going to be going against guys that are much higher owned than they should be just because people see that mark. And DraftKings this year, I would estimate it's like 15 to 20% of people that are really just trying to play DVP plays in terms of the main slate. So something to keep in mind. And I think something to also note when you see the ownership projections and all that stuff. If these guys have a green mark here, if they look like they're in a good spot, like Tyler Huntley, I bet gets higher owned than he should be just because of people seeing a low matchup for him and remembering what he did last year. But it's one of those things where you have to, I think, be mindful of how everybody builds lineups, not just the sharp players, and the casual players will land on Nick Chubb. 25% was a pretty big tell because he didn't project well anywhere. People wanted to go against that Houston matchup. They went to Nick Chubb, and that's kind of thing that certainly can be a real anathema if you are trying to play a guy you think is going to be low owned. Mike White, tough spot for him. He was terrible in the red zone. I was seeing with one of our Football Outsiders articles this week where they broke down his red zone passing. I believe he was 5 for 18 in the red zone. Might have been 6 for 18, but somewhere in that range, really bad, which would have meant the difference basically between the Jets winning and losing. And I warned about this one. Then in that first game against Chicago, Mike White looked fantastic, was literally perfect numerically going into this spot against Buffalo, a team that's getting healthier, a team that's also, again, Tre'Davious White matters a lot for this team. And if he's going to be running pretty close to a full allotment of snaps, I think he was at 50% last week, but like, he's getting there, and he's a guy that could certainly make plays on that field and also take away an entire side of the field if we're going to assume that he has the same production before his knee injury. But I think Tre'Davious White's a guy that matters a lot, and Mike White, to me, going to have to throw, but it's not going to be a high efficiency game if he does throw a lot. Huntley, it's funny because you look at these numbers and they really do look good, but overall he didn't do a lot, didn't get the ball downfield, certainly coming off the bench in a game where he didn't expect to play. You'd expect him to be better coming off of a week of game planning, but Huntley, I think, is an interesting tournament play. And I just worry about seeing that easy matchup here, the 24th in green, because it means that people might play Huntley. To me though, Huntley's a great tournament play, ran 10 times coming off the bench in that game. Like, he is a guy that can get it done on the ground, but can throw. And you could make the case that over the last year, he's been the better overall offensive QB for Baltimore. And I know that's going to sound like sacrilege. He's not as good of a rusher as Lamar. He doesn't take hits as well, all that stuff. That said, he actually gets the ball to guys in space. He makes plays with his arm. He trusts his arm. He goes out there and plays with a reckless abandon that I personally have not seen Lamar play with this year. I think it looks pretty good for him in the spot, and I think he's an interesting player overall. Eric, I'm not going to, no either ors right now. I got to keep this tight. Got to keep this tight for the people watching after the fact. All right, we got Kenny Pickett here going against Baltimore. Baltimore's defense not that good, so maybe Pickett's live. I just don't think he has the upside this year to win a tournament right now. He's not getting it done in the red zone, which is a big part of this as well. Going against Atlanta, he actually was getting the ball downfield and wasn't doing that one. So wasn't able to produce heavily in that one. So I think for Kenny Pickett, I really wouldn't want to go his way much anymore this year. Next year, though, I think he's shown enough that he should be a guy you'd want in best ball and a guy who'll be more of a week-to-week DFS play. For the rest of this year, though, I just don't think it's worth chasing that dragon too much. And no worries, Eric. You're all good here. I just don't want to answer either or. So that's why I put subscriber mode on. But Eric's one of the regulars, so he's fine. But I don't want to trade questions. I don't like if you're doing trades in your league and you're going around YouTube chat looking for trades now. First of all, what the fuck league are you in? Second of all, like either or is like, we'll figure it out. Figure it out in the back half of the week. Is Lamar officially out? That's the expectation. Yeah. I don't think he's going to play this week, and he might be out for, I think 2 to 4 was what I was seeing on Twitter. But Harbaugh basically spelled it out that he's not going to be playing this week, barring a miracle. So we'll find out. But I just, with what he's shown on the field this year, like, I think he really is not rushing as much and not rushing as aggressively because he doesn't want to get hurt because of that big contract coming. So I don't see him forcing himself out there to play through a strained PCL where he couldn't even walk up the stairs when he was leaving the field. Like that looked bad. He shouldn't play this week. And I think he would also not be motivated to play himself this week. Other guys here, let's talk Brock Purdy real fast. Maybe kind of interesting going against Tampa Bay. I was allowed to throw, weirdly had a better game plan than Trey Lance had at any point when he was starting this year. Looked pretty good. I'm curious about the advanced stats when I pull them all in over the course of tonight and tomorrow. But Brock Purdy, I think, looked pretty good. Nice price tag on him. Low team total, low implied total in that game. And if you expect Brady to get rocked, probably hard for Brock Purdy to get there. But I do think he's a guy that you could certainly consider as somebody who can get back out there and be useful in fantasy. Maybe not this week, but for week 15, week 16, week 17, if he's the guy who's out there and they don't bring in a backup to really take the job, I think Purdy could be a guy that's pretty live. Also, how far has Russell Wilson fallen? And granted, this is certainly something where I guess maybe he could not play this week. $5,100 price tag, just ahead of Kyle Allen, just ahead of backups like Cooper Rush, Davis Mills, Gardner Minshew, behind Sam Darnold, tied with Brock Purdy, behind Ryan Tannehill, behind Pickett, behind backup Jacoby Brissett. Russell Wilson is priced behind Jacoby Brissett. That is not a thing you want to see if you're a Broncos fan and you're heavily invested quarterback. Maybe Russ can get it on track. Maybe it's a Hackett thing. Maybe it's his offense is being rudderless throughout the course of the year. But boy, this is like the biggest indoctrination of what Russ is just seeing him at 5,100. And boy, those best ball shares with Russ for me, I don't think are going to pan out very well. Is Trevor Lawrence trending up after the leg injury? He got back out there after it. It looked bad if you're watching on Red Zone or watching the game, but he was fine to play after, so I wouldn't have that necessarily be an issue. I guess the one risk point would be like if you're Jacksonville, if he feels like even a little bit banged up, is it worth trotting him out there at this point this year with your season pretty much a lost cause? I would think it's not, but that's the one risk point. He did get back out though after he hurt the leg, so I think he should be fine, but it certainly wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility they don't play him. And if that were the case, you get CJ Beathard out there, who's not a great player, but is mobile enough to maybe make some tournament lineups, but not a play you'd want to gravitate towards. Running back, Christian McCaffrey going against Tampa Bay. That is still a bad run matchup. McCaffrey, though, has the upside, gets the targets, all that stuff. That said, I don't know that it makes the most logical sense to play Tampa Bay and San Francisco like it's a shootout, which is the one way that McCaffrey can play off this price tag or pay off this price tag. Like, I don't trust it. I don't think it's a play you want to get to very much. Same thing for Saquon. The Eagles defense, again, getting better. Shut down Derrick Henry. Finally getting Jordan Davis back mattered a lot. He's a big body dude in the middle that they've been desperately missing without being able to get Sue out there for meaningful reps and looking like his former self. So they were not able to stop the run for weeks without Davis. Then Davis comes back in and plays a limited amount of snaps, and all of a sudden they're stopping the run again. Saquon's been bad this year. Like, people don't want to admit that. People aren't aware of it maybe, but he's been under league average in pretty much every advanced metric out there. He's not a guy to get to at this price tag. This kind of seems like a week to maybe pay down a little bit further at running back. I think that would include Derrick Henry. Love him in this spot. It feels like we haven't had one of those outlier Derrick Henry games in a while. Even this one, 25.4 fantasy points. Like, that's a fine game, but it's not really vintage Derrick Henry. Going against Jacksonville, again, with what I saw with the film, with what Jacksonville's been on the ground all year long in terms of defending the run, they've not been good. So this is a spot where if Jacksonville can't produce, whether they do have Trevor Lawrence at QB or it ends up being Beathard starting, Henry to me looks like a really good tournament play who could get closer to this 39 fantasy point output that he would some of these mid-20s ones that really don't win you anything tournament-wise at his price tag. Nick Chubb against Cincinnati. Always interested in the players who are going to be coming off a dud game that a lot of the field played. While I hack up a lung. But overall, going against Cincinnati, I expect Cincinnati to throw all over Cleveland. That's going to be a tough one for them. So Nick Chubb, to me, a player that just doesn't look that good relative to salary. If you're closer to 7K, you can get there as a tournament upside play. But Nick Chubb, I think, would much rather pay the $100 more to get to Derrick Henry this week. Dalvin Cook is a guy that I don't believe comes up in an optimizer at all. He looks like a really strong tournament play. And he kind of was this past week as well, where Cook has had some success running in really tough defensive matchups where teams do stop the pass well. They're a little more willing to feed Cook in those spots and feed him heavily. If Madison didn't get that one touchdown and Cook got it, I think he would have had a much bigger day than the 16.3 fantasy point one you're seeing, but still 20 touches, 86 yards against the Jets. Against Detroit, like they're going to get in the red zone a lot, and that could be Cook territory. So I think if you're not playing the passing offense, playing Cook makes a lot of sense at a price tag that also looks great. Like I think Cook's a very strong tournament play this week. Mixon's going to be back. You can see here, he's got the questionable tag on him, but the expectation is coming off the concussion protocol early in the week. So this spot for Mixon, I think, looks pretty good. Going against Cleveland, bad on the ground, bad through the air as well. But Mixon, I think is a guy that some risk profile that he can lose some more snaps to Samaje Perine, who legitimately I think has looked better than Joe Mixon so far this year. But to me, Mixon is a very strong play. The issue is you got this green here. He's also going to project extremely well. Mixon, I'm going to plant a flag right now. He's one of those guys that gets steamed up in ownership over the course of the week, and that makes him a play that maybe you want to get a little bit less of, or at least be strategic about when you're putting him in lineups. I'll tell you one thing that's not injured, that hair's not injured. My girlfriend saw Lawrence after the game and said, is he a model for a perfume commercial or does he play? Then continued to squirt all over the couch. Classy as always, lunchable connoisseur. He's not handsome though. He does kind of a model face. I'll give you that. He's got like the striking nose and long hair. So I could see it. That said, like I would say not conventionally handsome, but feel free to disagree down in the chat. Let me know, or in the comments after the fact. Tell me how hot Trevor Lawrence is, and is she making you or your significant other squirt on the couch? Please tell me down below. Samaje Perine not going to be in play this week with Mixon back. I just don't think that's a good play at this point. Tony Pollard, though, we talked about a little bit already. Going against Houston, it's tough with the touches, like under 15 touches. Certainly that game got enough out of hand that it's not looking that good. Nate saying horseman. Yeah, he's a bit of a horseman, but beautiful hair, long snout. That is a horseman. So on the nose. Shout out Nate. Shout out the chat as well. Guys, if you're watching as well, hit the like button, please. Help us out here. Help me. Reward me doing live content, please. And then if you're watching after the fact too, also hit the like button so I get it on both ends. That's the real win-win here. Pollard, though, in this spot, the issue is you have to expect him to be really effective in a short amount of snaps. So that's where I think there is some fear in playing Pollard, but still the price tag works. Pollard, I will say, single-handedly carrying a ton of my best ball teams. So I hope he does well again. But I do think if he gets steamed up in ownership, if he's a guy that ends up being a popular play, and he might be because this 30-second matchup, according to DraftKings DVP, and everybody loves targeting running backs against Houston, he's going to look like a good analytical matchup. He's going to look probably not as good in terms of a median projection. And those are the kind of plays that when you see this green 32 here, you know that the casual player is going to put him in more than he probably should get put in. So Pollard can get there, but you might want him to get there for somebody else rather than yourself because he's not going to have that great of a median projection, I don't think. Miles Sanders, maybe interesting against the Giants. I don't know. Like I feel like Miles Sanders, I've not gotten right, and I don't think he's himself gotten himself right at any point. Plays well on the island games, 34 fantasy points there. Besides that, you see the floor, 5.4, 5.8. Miles Sanders, kind of a nice tournament play, but it's going to be an ugly game against the Giants, I think, and it's not one that I necessarily want to get a lot of shares of a guy who's probably a bit overpriced here. Zeke, though, kind of interesting. I think you'd see him getting more work. He's the guy that if they pull away against Houston, certainly can get more of that workload, seizing the game or sealing the game away, rather. So Ezekiel Elliott, I think, relative to what we think of these players, and I hate to say this out loud, relative to what the situation will be, I think Zeke is a more interesting play than Tony Pollard because Tony Pollard's going to get steamed up a lot. Nobody wants to play Zeke now. I think this is exactly a week that you would want to play Zeke. The ownership is going to be there too heavy. Dameon Pierce, bad spot for him against Dallas. I don't think I'd want to play a single Texan against Dallas. Those guys are really just playing for nothing. They're playing inefficiently. Pierce had a lot of this past week and it got close to working out, but not quite. Was weird. He didn't get goal line touches. Like they had him out for a few of the plays, but just didn't give him the ball at the goal line, even though he's clearly their best rusher. A lot of, Benjamin out there. Also a lot of Dario Ngubawale out there for Houston. So Pierce, to me, the kind of play that you just don't make against a really good defense. And maybe that's a contrarian play, but he's priced in such a way at 6K that I don't think you want to get there too much. That said, low DVP ranking here, so the casual players won't get there either. Something to keep in mind. Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift priced evenly. Swift sees a lot of that workload back. I believe had a 50% snap share last week in that game as Williams went down a little bit. Both these guys can get there. Neither guy's going to make you feel the most comfortable. Both tournament plays that I think are in play, but nothing that's that sexy. I hate Pacheco. Singletary is getting his role stolen by James Cook. So James Cook, let's see what he did last week. Not Cock. James Cook. 14 for 64, 6 catches on 6 targets looks pretty good for Cook. If he gets that workload again against the Jets, he could pay off, but it's like basically a 3-headed backfield for Buffalo with Singletary, with Cook, and also with Nyheim Hines. All these guys are getting meaningful work. I don't think you should want to play Cook too much. If you have them in best ball, great. If you have them in DFS, I think that's probably a mistake right now. Just not the kind of play that I would necessarily want to force my way to. So anybody that jumps out, Deonta Foreman, 5,400. You can make the case to play Foreman this week going against Seattle, honestly. Like I think it was Chip who asked that earlier. Like the play. I don't think the median projection is going to be that crazy. He does pose some risk on DraftKings because he just doesn't get catches that often. You could see about 2 a game for the most part sometimes, but downside is 0. So you won't get those easy PPR points. But in terms of touchdown equity, you can get there. And I think there is a faint chance that Carolina-Seattle actually puts up some points. So I think Foreman's a pretty interesting tournament play with that price tag coming down and wouldn't mind getting there. Michael Carter, if he's back in, tough matchup against Buffalo. Zonovan Knight seems like he's earned some snaps for himself moving forward as well. So that's definitely a tough spot to go to. Carter, Knight, I think both guys out of play with that backfield getting more crowded if we assume Carter's going to be back in. Anybody cheap down here? Yeah, nobody that cheap who stands out meaningfully. Jordan Mason got a ton of touches this past week. Maybe he gets more if Tampa Bay can't pull their share, but would you play him in a main slate tournament? Probably not. Maybe an afternoon slate kind of play. Really nobody jumping out meaningfully down here, barring somebody getting ruled out for an injury over the course of the week. Wide receiver is interesting because I think Justin Jefferson is the best play on a slate by a wide margin. Again, that's why he's on the thumbnail. I try to give you guys the hints of what's to come in these videos. I think Justin Jefferson is a very strong play. You've seen the run that he's been on recently. Tough game against the Jets, but I think expected that coming in. Like the Jets have stopped the deep ball really well. They defend wide receivers, especially wide receiver ones really well. Not a shocker there. You know who doesn't defend wide receiver ones really well? Detroit. You know who gave up a monster game to Justin Jefferson? Oh, no, didn't give up a monster game to Justin Jefferson earlier in the year. But I think you know who's going to remember not getting a monster game against Detroit earlier this year? 4.4 points against Detroit. I just don't think that happens here. To me, Dalvin Cook is the more interesting play relative to salary, relative to game script and all that. But Jefferson doesn't come up as super well projected. We know what the upside. Like, would it shock you if you put up, this number here, 16 targets, 193? If Jared Goff can hold up his end, I think it wouldn't shock me one bit. So tough to pay the $9K for Jefferson because he doesn't have a floor quite as good as like Cooper Kupp did last year at higher price tags. But certainly the upside is there. And for certainly for battle royales an underdog, I think Justin Jefferson is a play you want to get to and take the shot that people will see that box score and go, oh, he was bad against Detroit. I wonder what they did. They bracketed him and he had a bad game and other guys were doing fine. So like he didn't need it. But like if they need it this week, Jefferson can get there. And I think that's the kind of play that I like to get to. Diggs against the Jets doesn't grade out too well. High price tag as well for a tough matchup. He's red here too, so the casuals won't get to him. Same thing for A.J. Brown. I think Diggs and Brown. I could see it more for Diggs than Brown. I think Brown had his big game last week. Moving forward, though, not the kind of player that I think would be too exciting after he had the outlier game against his former team this past week. Foreman seems like a good play against Seattle. I was guessing that was the Panthers that project well that you were saying. No, it's actually Visca. Visca has a 10-point projection from Stochastic for reasons that are unclear. I'm sorry to spoil that now, but I was like, what the fuck? Why is the Visca Chenault in every lineup? I got to think that comes down, but I guess Visca ran enough snaps last week that's why he was there. But no, I would agree that Foreman is the better play out of him and Laviska Chenault. I would say that, in fact, by a wide margin. Price tag coming up for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think he's still going to come up quite a bit in optimizers. He's a solid play. The targets are really what matters here. And it was interesting to note this past week. So Jared Goff was actually one of the best QBs in terms of Football Outsiders defense adjusted yards metrics that we're saying like short throws. Jared Goff is the best QB in the league. Obviously beyond that, Jared Goff has always had his struggles, but Jared Goff knows how to feed Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I think the underdog guys too, the recap show with Daigle, they broke down basically what the route chart was for Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's all short routes to the outside. Those are the kind of things that are always going to be there against every team. So I don't know that you want to pay the rising price tag, especially if the ownership is going to follow him as he's coming in just under 8K. But he has been rock solid. This is now 2 straight weeks over 30 fantasy points. 3 out of the last 4 were 25 fantasy points. The one that he didn't get there was against the Giants, who defensively are still pretty sound. Amon-Ra, I think, interesting if he's not going to be highly owned, but if he is going to be highly owned, the kind of player that you probably don't want to keep chasing week after week. Being price sensitive for these guys, they start to move up in terms of pricing is an important thing. And Amon-Ra, easy matchup. I do think his ownership stays pretty high this week. 30th ranked matchup for him. Yeah, it's going to be tough, I think, for Amon-Ra to not see high ownership coming off those last 2 games. CeeDee Lamb against Houston, an interesting play as well, because he's not going to pop up DVP-wise, but is in as good of a situation as any of the running backs are. That said, how much CeeDee Lamb do you need with Houston not likely to score a lot? That was the same issue I had with playing Cleveland too heavy last week. So this spot to me looks like one for CeeDee Lamb where maybe he can get there on 1 or 2 big plays, but it feels like maybe more of a Michael Gallup tournament play. You hope that he can spike the upside on 1 or 2 big throws. Lamb, to me, you need him to really get a full game's workload, and Houston's not going to score enough points to do that. Shout out Max for the super chat. I appreciate that. Playing a tournament with 10 friends. Should I just play a cash lineup or do some stacks? If you're in a tournament with 10 friends and they don't play DraftKings at a high level, I would just run the cash game optimal. I talked about, I play in a 3-man league with my best friends from high school. We're pretty sharp about fantasy, but not using optimizers, not doing all that stuff. I play the cash game lineup from Stochastic every week, which, this top projected optimal one. I've won, I think, 80% of the games this year and had like a run of 15 games in a row I'd won. So like, play the cash game optimal if you're not in the sharpest rooms and it's that small of a field, and don't get too cute. Like, I think that's one thing that if those guys are hand building, which they likely are, if they're casual players, you're just going to be better off just playing the middle outcome of everything. Lunchable Connoisseur is saying that Amon-Ra is going to be highly owned, but I think I'm playing him regardless. That was the mistake I made this week, was I thought that basically a lot of the field is going to concentrate around a couple of plays, or I guess 3 plays in particular. It was Josh Jacobs, which didn't quite get there. The Q tag, I think, scared a lot of people off. Garrett Wilson and an Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I said, fuck it. I'm not going to play Amon-Ra St. Brown, Josh Jacobs, and Garrett Wilson. You know what bit me in the ass was not playing Amon-Ra St. Brown and Garrett Wilson, even though I had a ton of Devontae Adams, which helped me get a bunch of lineups to the cash line and actually have some decent finishers. Double stacks, or not double stacks, but lineups with both Adams and Tyreek Hill got there. That said, like, these guys are really good value plays and have upside, and I think there is also a pretty good floor to Amon-Ra St. Brown. That said, if Amon-Ra St. Brown stayed out with that injury, he wouldn't have gotten there, or if he didn't get that second touchdown, he would have maybe not quite gotten there. I think that's the kind of play you should make. So I would not want to play Amon-Ra, even though that bit me in the ass so bad last week. I think if he's going to be 20% owned, the salary's up, and there is some risk to the matchup that they just defend him a little bit better. I think that's enough to get me off of Amon-Ra's chalk, but like one of those guys that like good play on paper, but for tournaments, sometimes you don't want to play the guys that are too good on paper. Christian Kirk in a nice matchup if Trevor Lawrence is in there, but he's going to probably be owned again because this low ranking on DraftKings. I estimate, again, like 20 to 25% of the field is playing these DVPs as gospel. So just keep that in mind if you love a guy. Chris Godwin probably going to get targeted a lot. Like, he is Tom Brady's safety blanket, had 13 targets yesterday. Okay fantasy day at 14.3 fantasy points. He has had a ceiling, though, 32 against Cleveland a couple weeks ago, and they blew that one against in overtime, I believe. So that's one that, you could talk me into going to Godwin just because he is the short route guy. He's the guy that's going to be the safety valve when Tom Brady gets pressured time and time again. But Chris Godwin is certainly a player that makes more sense on DraftKings than FanDuel because he doesn't have a ton of touchdown equity, and he's getting 1 per game as a high point. Yeah, he's had 2 touchdowns on the year. His max is 1 in a game. Like, don't play him on FanDuel on DraftKings, though, because of the PPR points. Maybe you can get there a little bit. Garrett Wilson still being cheap seems wrong to me. Yeah, I mean, let's see what his price tag is. He is at 5,900. I agree that his natural price tag probably should be closer to 7K at this point. Honestly, you can make the case even for low 7s for him. But that said, I do think there's a trap matchup for him. I don't think he's going to project as well against Buffalo. Low team total this week, whereas the one versus Minnesota was a little bit higher. So you can expect some production there. I like Wilson, though. Like, can he beat tough matchups regularly? I'm not sure about that yet with where he is in his development. But if anybody of the rookies can, it probably is him. So I get liking him. But I think, again, if people want to go chasing him one more week, like, I think Amon-Ra and Garrett Wilson will carry a lot of that vestigial ownership from their previous big games. And those are the kind of plays that really do cause some risk for you if you're playing them heavy. So if you want to get a taste of Garrett Wilson, I don't mind it. But I think the field will be there again because they don't see a reason for him to fail. And ranking-wise, too, 22nd ranked team according to DVP. So casuals will probably be okay playing that as well, seeing his last few games. Anybody else jumping out here? Mike Evans, again, like a guy too that should be fed. Like he was great when Tom Brady actually looked his way and threw him the ball. I think that's going to be the case against San Francisco too. I think also there's going to be a lot of negative game scripts for Tampa Bay. The issue is really just going to be a lot of pressure coming Tom Brady's way. If he doesn't have enough time to get the ball downfield to Mike Evans, that's a problem for Mike Evans. But tournament upside is certainly there. When's the last time he even got there? 4 straight games at 10 or less fantasy points. Only broke 30 once this year against Kansas City. Yeah, it doesn't look great for Mike Evans. I might hold a candle for Mike Evans just because I think he represents a really high upside play, but he's certainly one that I don't have a lot of faith against going to San Francisco. Like the low total, it's all pretty bad for him. Besides these plays, anybody else jumping out? 1 week, Deontay Johnson's going to catch a touchdown. Like that's the one thing I'll say. I don't know you want to stack him. I don't know that you want to play him too heavy, but boy, he has been so disappointing and the workload's there. And at a certain point, the variance does start to level out and you can have Deontay Johnson get a touchdown. That said, I think you're hoping for that more in your redraft leagues and your best ball shares. Like that's where you want Deontay Johnson to get there. At this point, I think playing him in DFS and expecting a ceiling game feels pretty unlikely, but we are in silly season of football where it's important to keep in mind as motivation starts to wane, as teams are just, not playing for as much because they're in the playoffs or they're safely out of the playoffs or they're outright tanking like the Rams, some of the other teams out there are. You can see these outlier games and things can get really weird. So I think that's a situation where maybe you could see him get there, but it's not going to be the most likely outcome. Evans and Gabe Davis is super spicy. Yeah, it's an interesting play. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind. Those are both very boom bust guys, though. So you got to adjust your profile accordingly if you know that, and certainly not play them heavy. But I love boom bust players. Like at the end of the day, that's what wins you tournaments. So you can embrace it, but you got to embrace it strategically and embrace it at low volume for the most part. Gabe Davis is cheap too. Let's see. What's Gabe's price tag? Oh, that is down a lot. That is down a lot. 5,300. Hasn't had an outlier game in a few weeks. DVP looks pretty good. It's always hard to say like play Gabe Davis because he never comes through when you expect him to. He comes through at random times. And even then, like this one against Minnesota is like, okay, like that's not really setting the world on fire relative to a $6,400 price tag. So you can play Gabe and hope you get the 35, but like that's only happened once this year. And I feel like that's the kind of thing that can certainly bite you in the ass. But I think that's a fair point from Lunchable here. If Sauce Gardner's on Diggs, then you could see Gabe Davis sort of pop up a little bit more naturally. So maybe he comes there, but again, just like a low volume play to me. You don't want to have your entire portfolio for the week around Gabe Davis just because he's so volatile and he can easily not give you a 0, but like pretty close to a 0. I love that combo at the 5-6 and underdog. That's a good place to play it. Playing him in battle royales, I think is a good place to do it. On DraftKings, again, though, it's like a 5 to 10% play to me. Rest of the wide receivers, anybody else go cheap down here? Again, Visca's going to come up. I really don't get why. He had 2 targets last week. I don't know what Stochastic's putting in their projections in the early point of the week, but let's find out in a little bit. Tight ends, dumpster fire again. You have Kelsey against Denver, tough matchup, and a matchup too where they probably don't need a lot from him. Mark Andrews against Pittsburgh, I think it's pretty live. I will continue to play Mark Andrews every week until he has one good game. Let's confirm the last time he actually had a good game. So he has not scored over 13 fantasy points since week 6. So that is a good stretch of time to not do it. What a hot start, man. Like to go from this to this, these are like 2 different players entirely. That said, going against Pittsburgh, I don't think it's a bad play. Like I still think trying 5 to 10% of Mark Andrews is a good move week after week. And I think having Huntley back in, like again, no DVP thing that's going to throw off flags for people that are going to make the casuals play him heavy. Maybe people remember what he did last year with Huntley, and that's a possibility. But I think that he's a play that could get steamed up a little bit by the industry because of that. But I think Mark Andrews looks really good in this situation going against Pittsburgh. He's going to be a reliable target. Huntley likes to feed guys that he trusts a lot. He doesn't spread the ball around as much as Lamar Jackson has. So to me, Andrews, I think a nice tournament play to get to this week. Hawkinson's going to be popular as well. We're going to see him in the optimizer in a little bit. But yeah, 6 for 33 last week. He's got a nice floor. I think, again, another guy that you're not excited to get to, but maybe he has a ceiling in lineups where you stack up Kirk Cousins and you maybe tag him on with Jefferson. But if you're playing Jefferson at 9K, you probably need a ceiling game for him to get there. So maybe you don't play Hawkinson and you just single stack him with Kirk or just play Jefferson straight away. Kittle kind of a disappointment against Miami. I thought he was going to do more. I don't think he's going to be a beneficiary of Brock Purdy being out there. Brock Purdy, a lot of checkdowns to McCaffrey, not using the tight end that much. Kittle to me, not looking that great. I don't know that it's a play that I necessarily want to rely on heavily. Bonesaw asking Jameson Williams questions. So let's look up Jameson Williams. I don't think he played enough snaps to trust. I don't know that you could expect him to get there. One target in the game. So that's certainly not going to jump out. He's going to be good at some point. I don't know that it's going to be this year. I just don't think he's going to get enough work here. And I guess Detroit is still technically in contention for the playoffs. So maybe they can start to use him a little bit more, but it's not the kind of play that's going to excite me too much. I'm not answering that question. Let's keep going through tight ends. Anybody cheap down here? I mean, we know what tight end is at this point. Play cheap guys. Hope one of them hits. Cade Otton may be interesting against San Francisco with what we saw. He's another safety blanket for Tom Brady. Another one who maybe has to be kept in the block a little bit more this week, or they bring in Keeft and have him block a little bit more. So I think that's a situation for Cade Otton where people might chase the big-ish game, 10 targets and 28 yards is quite the box score for Cade Otton, but that's what Tom Brady is, man. He's just not willing to get the ball downfield so the guys actually can make plays. He wants his dink and dunk plays. So that's one that I think for Cade Otton, I'm willing to not go there this week, even though great play for me on Showdown last week that helped carry a lot of lineups. All right, let's go over to the Fantasy Cruncher Optimizer. Let's see what came up there. I did crunch right before the show, so we'll find that real fast. But guys, if you've enjoyed this video or if you've gotten anything useful out of it, please hit the like button. Please subscribe down below. Appreciate that a bunch. Helps me continue to grow this channel as I grind more stuff. And tomorrow we will have the data show where I'll give you stats from every single game for the week. It'll be a short form one, so tune in for that one. Won't waste too much of your time like I am today as I talk like Lindsay Lohan after a pack of cigs throughout the course of this video. Tomorrow, it'll be a 10-minute video or less, and it's going to have a lot of great data in it. So go check that out tomorrow. All right, so I should also hit the flashing GIF. Yes, please subscribe, like, and comment. Yeah, there we go. I haven't played the flashing GIF in a minute, but subscribe, like, and comment. New videos daily here on Splash Play. And as you can tell, maybe not by today, but in general, the other videos, I put my full ass in every video. No half-assing around here because I want to make sure you guys are getting good info and not just following YouTube algorithms of guys who suck, but are really good at work at YouTube. Here we give you real info and we will make you a better fantasy football player. I promise that. So hang out with me here on Splash Play and Pete. Hopefully Pete will survive one more week and make it to Friday, but we'll see. Probably gonna have a guest on our Friday flagship show. Here are the optimal lineups we're gonna see. Derrick Henry coming up quite a bit. 100% of lineups with Derrick Henry. Love that play. Good projection on him. 21.7 from Stochastic. Don't mind that. Now, why is Laviska Shenault coming up? Why does he have a 10.7 projection from Stochastic? All great questions to ask. I don't know why, but he's representing a value. Maybe it's just that he's the best projected guy out of this price point. Let's actually look at that real fast. Sort by salary. Because it could just be that his 3,300 makes everything work. Is there anybody around here? Yeah, so he's got the best projection of everybody in this range. So I think it's a combination that he's got a pretty good projection for a guy that's cheap, and he's also probably making a lot of lineups with Derrick Henry work. So that's why with the Stochastic data, I'm pretty sure that that he's coming up a lot. But let me make sure that they haven't updated. Oh, actually, they put in an update. Let's see if it knocked down Laviska, because that would be important to know. Laviska. No, Laviska's still got a 10.7 projection here. Don't get it. If anybody has ETR out there and they ran their projections already, let me know what Viska looks like on there. But I don't think Viska's a great play on paper. And if he's coming up as a symptom of trying to build certain lineups and get the higher dollar players in, I wouldn't play him. Like, I just don't think that's a great play to get to. Maybe for cash, though, he might be a guy to go to. You're seeing a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown and his overall optimal. Dallas Goedert, if he's going to be back in, which I guess is a possibility. No. So I think Stochastic projections early in the week, I think they don't pay as much attention there. So I would not put Dallas Goedert in as a play. It seems like he won't be active until next week, so keep that in mind. CD Lamb coming up a lot. This is an interesting crunch because I really don't agree with a lot of these plays. The important ones, though, that I think you can sort of take to the bank. Amon-Ra being heavily owned, Derrick Henry being heavily owned, Jared Goff coming along for the Amon-Ra ride being heavily owned. I think all that makes sense. We're seeing 3 out of 25 lineups here of a Detroit stack of 3 men, 12 of at least a 2-player stack. So Detroit stacks are probably going to hold up as being plays that are highly valued or decently valued. Might be the most valuable stack of the week relative to projections. I also ran an optimal here with just the stacks, and you end up with even more Detroit, it looks like. A little more Minnesota, a little more Tennessee. That's probably, what are the Tennessee ones? Oh, you can't fucking sort that. Let's see. Who else are we getting from? Who else would we possibly be getting from Tennessee? Oh, Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks might not play this week. He got like super concussed, got like a real concussed. If you didn't see the play, I would encourage you to go watch it because it's horrifying. But he did make the catch, but basically like had the fencing thing when you guys get concussed, where his arm was still up holding the ball, even though he was fucking out cold. So I don't think Treylon Burks is going to be in a good spot to make it off the concussion protocol this week. Obviously, we'll know more by the end of the week, but something to keep in mind for Treylon Burks. But yeah, it seems like the key takeaways from where this optimization is right now is that A, Stochastic needs to take out Dallas Goedert the projection so I can do this a little more easily. B, Derrick Henry going to be an important play. Joe Mixon going to be an important play. And Amon-Ra St. Brown going to be an important play. So those guys to me, I think, are going to be the ones that get steamed up a lot. Henry in particular, to me, seems like the play that now fits the projections, fits the DVP, fits how the industry is going to think about it. So I think Derrick Henry going to be a tough chalk play to avoid, but going to be one of those things that maybe you do avoid him just to get away from the field. That said, if you get away from him, and because the field's going to be there, and he puts up 40, like you're fucked. So keep that in mind for Derrick Henry. But overall, I think he's a strong play right now. It's represented in every facet of the game. And Amon-Ra as well is a strong play, but 7,800 tough. Like going to be a lot of lineups, I would think, with Derrick Henry, Amon-Ra, and Garrett Wilson not coming up here at all. So something to keep in mind there. It seems like the price tag and the matchup have knocked him down enough, according to Stochastic, to not be there. We'll see if maybe they juice him up a little bit, but he has a 13.97 projection on him, so not that great relative to the price tag. So even though the prices come up a little bit, it's not high enough to really, I guess, scare you off. But projection-wise, this does not look that good. Even though, again, a couple nice box score games, maybe a week to let Garrett Wilson, people just take that one, let the chalk go there, and then go somewhere else. Yeah, it was a great catch by Treylon Burks. Like, hard to argue that, but definitely one that I think would be hard to replicate very often when you literally can't move your arms because your brain exploded. So good for Treylon Burks, but yeah, that was gross. Like that's the gross part of the NFL. Guys get concussed like that, where it's like that bad. Oof, not the best. Baker going to the XFL, Ben DiNucci's backup. Honestly, he should go to the XFL. I think that would be a better move for him than trying to make it to a team. If you're the Niners, I don't know why you'd pick him up besides depth, but he's been one of the worst QBs in the league. So if you're a Baker Mayfield stan, I apologize, but he is just not a dude that I would want to have on my team at this point. Tight end, again, it's kind of ruined for this one, but Dallas Goedert going to be chalky according to Stochastic, but I don't think he's going to actually be in the game. I think they're assuming he comes off IR, but it seems like week 15 will be the move. Hawkinson, probably going to be very popular too. If I had to guess, assuming that Goddard is not off IR this week, probably Hawkinson gets a lot of ownership this week. Dulcich coming off the monster game as well, should see some ownership. 6 for 85 on 8 targets. He's been good. Certainly a guy that also is going to play, even if the star players start to sit a little bit more. That said, honestly, Brett Rippon might be an upgrade if he starts playing over Russ. So I don't mind Dulcich if he gets chalky, but 3,400 is not a bad price tag. And shout out Iceman. Iceman, the one man who hates the short form videos and wants me to go live every day. And he doesn't come in until the end of the video. So Iceman, are you rewarding me going live? I don't know that you are. Baker's just a knockoff Manziel, much less cool Manziel, I feel like. He tried the headband thing to make himself, to finesse people into thinking he's cool. But is he cool? I don't think so. I don't think Baker Mayfield's that cool. All right, guys, there you go. There's your early look here. Obviously, it's all going to change throughout the course of the week, but I want to plant my flags for the guys that I think are going to be pretty highly owned. And now I think we know Derrick Henry's going to get there, going to be the Josh Jacobs this week without the Q tag on him. So that ownership could get pretty high. I think Tony Pollard too is going to be one of those guys that gets steamed up a lot by casuals, but probably doesn't get reflected as well in the ownership projections out there from the Stochastics and the ETR of the world, but we'll find out as we go. Either way, though, tomorrow, Fancy Data Show, short form coming here to the channel. So please subscribe, hit the like button before you go. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow this show at Splash Play Pod. And of course, come back every day because I'm putting something out there, showdown videos, more than that. And I appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out, really and truly. So good luck, guys. Go play some Underdog Battle Royales and use the promo code SPLASH. I'll see you guys tomorrow for that beautiful, beautiful data show we're going to do. All right, bye, guys.